Hey guys, still there, and welcome back to the Armor Review. It's Ash and Shadows. I'm on version 2.46, and today I'm looking at UNASUR. Now, in case you're wondering what the hell is UNASUR, it stands for Union of South American Nations. So this is a collection of various nations, and you might find infantry from, say, Argentina working together with Colombia, working together with Brazil. I'm not exactly an expert in these areas, so let me know what sort of unit appeals to you and from what nation they are. Now, being a collective of nations allows them to have a large diversity of units. And this starts out immediately with infantry in the command section here. You have a lot of transport options. Of course, the command infantry itself is nothing special, it's just a 100-point group, 5 guys. They have the MBB 1720, and of course, note up front, don't look at the unit models too much, just go for the unit stats. Unit models are virtually impossible to change in this game. BTR 60 PB, nothing special. Then we have the BTR 80A. Now we're getting somewhere. This thing is also amphibious. We have the Guarani. This is a transport that has a bit more armor, a bit faster amphibious, and it comes with a Bushmaster, which is a massive upgrade over that 2A72. And then finally we have the MI-17 or MI-171SH, I think. Now, interestingly, we have two different command tanks, the Leopard HQ and the T-72 HQ. Priced almost the same. Leopard slightly more mobile, T-72 more heavily armored, virtually everywhere. Frontal, side, everywhere. This thing just takes a lot more of a beating, but keep in mind it is not as heavily armored as some of the other command tanks. So this is not something like the T-14 Armata command tank that you can use from, I think, the Russian group. It's of course far cheaper, but does not withstand as much armor or bombardment as that other unit. A couple other command options that we have here. A Humvee command unit, the EE9 Cascavel HQ. This is a very fast off-roader, 95 kilometers per hour. Also amphibious, a little bit of armor on it, but then again, you really not want your command vehicle fighting. And finally, we have the EE11 Yurutu HQ. This thing, again, poorly armored, but interestingly, the fastest amphibious vehicle that they have available. So, an amphibious command vehicle at 50 kph, moving off-road at 100, with an autonomy of 800, means that this thing has a pretty good chance of keeping itself alive. Then we have a standard APC, nothing really special here, a couple of transports, and as for their options for logistics, they have the Terra 865 BM KPI. Off-road is slow for this thing, 50. Supplies only 500, meaning that you're not going to be transporting much. Amphibious speed at 25, it's there, the amphibious capability, but it might as well not be. The better alternative is the SA-150. This thing transports 800 points of supplies versus 500 and is a little bit faster off-road, but not amphibious. So take your pick. Then infantry. Lots of different infantry. It's a bit foggy because you're looking at a lot of transport options. So overall it might look like they have a ton of infantry. That's not entirely wrong. They have a lot of infantry, but let's say you're looking at the Agroat. What you see here is only Agroat with a lot of different transports. Speaking of the guys themselves, they're an AGGM team. 3-man squad. Their range is pretty bad for an AGGM at 2,555 meters. This means that while your missile is airborne, the tank or whatever you're firing at will keep closing at you. And if it's a tank, it takes a shot at you at 2275 meters or even 2450. Some tanks have the capability of firing back at you at 2450 meters. One shot will kill the ATGM team, and with a missile that is not fire and forget, these guys will die fairly quickly. Now they do have the Spike MR, which is a top attacking missile, and 15 AP is no joke. If this thing does hit your tank, you will notice. As for their transport options, BTR 60 PB, again the BTR 80, the Guarani, the M113BR, just your standard APC, And then we have some more exotic transports. The VCPT is, well, it uses the unit model of a Marder, and it is mostly reminiscent of a Marder. 5 frontal armor, 3 side, a little bit on the back, a little bit on the top. Autocannon on there, 3 AP. It's not enough to go through the frontal armor of most IFVs. And interestingly, it's not enough to go through its own armor. So this thing will not be able to kill itself if it encounters something similar. BMP-3 is a little better. It has the Arcan missile, so it can defeat enemy IFVs, provided that those IFVs don't have an APS on them. If they do, then your vehicle is just going to survive because the Arcan missile will get stopped, at least most likely will get stopped by the APS. And finally we have the EE-11 Yurutu. Nice vehicle, not particularly heavily armored, only 2 on every side and 1 at the top. It is amphibious, so that's a nice capability to have, and it comes with a grenade launcher. This means that you're going to be doing quite a bit of damage against infantry, but against anything else, not so much. Next up we have the Atakar Fire Support Squad. These guys come with an M40 recoilless rifle. Well, they class it as a law. The thing has the icon of a recoilless rifle. It has both the capability of attacking infantry as well as vehicles at a ground range of 1400 meters. It only carries 12 of these things. You're a 5-man squad, so your survivability is slightly higher. But overall, they are not that good at staying alive for very long. I recommend you keep these guys in a second line position from where they will attack the enemy with that recoilless rifle, preferably firing back at infantry, because a vehicle, regardless whether you're looking at a tank or an IFV, will already be in range and will already be killing you. They have some new options that we haven't seen yet, which is the Gaucho. Very fast off-roader, 95 kph, 800 km autonomy, and with the capability of spotting stuff for itself using good optics. For 20 points you're basically getting 2 reasonably good units. One against against infantry and anti-vehicle, and the other one quite capable at scouting. Besides that, they have the M171SH. Nothing special about this thing. Just a really big helicopter, which is only armed with a machine gun. Next up is the Escorpion. These guys are elite troops. Unfortunately, not a heavy tag on them. This does mean you're paying slightly less for them at 18 points. They come with the Tavor TAR-21, very accurate weapon. Even on the move they can still use that pretty well. They have the Ultimax 100 squad automatic weapon and the Appelasse, which you might remember from the French. Carry 8 charges, and with a very high rate of fire and good AP, they can slice through enemy armor very, very quickly. As mentioned, no heavy tag, and that means that they are slightly more likely to go down. So try to keep these guys alive and rotate them, making sure that you can resupply the guys which have taken some casualties. Because I think you can get a lot of use out of them, but you need to be a little bit more careful with them than you do with some other units. As for the transports, I would recommend going with a Gurarani. These guys are sure to deliver them fast and to provide a bit more AP/anti-infantry capability at range using that Bushmaster 2. Next is the Forza Rapida. 2 different weapons when you compare that, or actually, never mind, all different weapons when you compare them to the Escorpion. They have the Imbel 1A2 assault rifle, which has worse stats than the Tavor TAR-21. These guys are shock trained, and of course that also shows in accuracy. 45 versus 60, 23 versus 40. Rate of fire slightly lower, but considering you're firing a higher caliber, that makes up for the amount of suppression and HE damage that you do. And then the FN Mag. This thing is, again, quite comparable to the Ultimax. But once again, thanks to the shock training, you're sacrificing a little bit of accuracy, which means that the Ultimax, I think, ultimately will be more effective, because it delivers more lead on target, it delivers a slightly higher amount of suppression, because you're just hitting them more often. And then as for the anti-tank weapon, they carry more charges, but it's less effective. its effectiveness is only 18 AP, and your range is worse, 455 versus 630. They fire them faster. That might be their saving grace. It really depends on whether you're going to be able to get all of those weapons away. If not, well, then 18 AP will still make quite a dent in enemy armor. I'm just not sure if it's going to be enough. Next up, that was the Forza Rapida. I think we have no new transports there. We have the Jaguars. Let's see. Jaguars, shock train squad, 15 man, allowing them to survive slightly longer than the Forza Rapida. Again, shock training on both, that's handy. But you're paying almost twice the price for the Jaguars when you compare them to the Forza. Anti-tank capability is slightly better. Rate of fire slightly worse. Range is significantly better, 180 meters. The thing is that these guys carry more rounds because they are more survivable, because 15 man. They have the SAF 200 SMG, and this is one of those SMGs that has a 1.1 HE. In case you're wondering, does 0.1 HE make a difference? Yes, it does. These will allow you to deal more damage to enemy infantry. As for the other weapon that they have, the RPD, it is pretty similar in capabilities to the Afan Mag. As for their transports, you don't really have a lot of options. And considering that these guys are mostly going up against enemy infantry, I would recommend the EE-11 Yorutu, because that grenade launcher can soften up enemy infantry and then the Jaguars themselves will finish them off. Next we have the Cascabel, another elite trained group. Let's compare those to the Scorpion. The Cascabel are armed with the Galil ACE-32. Stats are very, very similar, but you're firing a larger caliber weapon at a high rate of fire, and yet you're ending at the same amount of suppression. I'm not sure if that's exactly fair, but here we are. The other weapon that they have is the K3 Para. Stats are exactly similar, at least in effectiveness, suppression and HE. Rate of fire, yes, it is slightly higher, but this one fires a 762, this one fires a 556. Maybe 762 should have slightly higher anti-ground and anti-helicopter range than the 556, but, well, up to you. The Cascabel also come with the Mara that we just saw on the other infantry. They are less effective at dealing with enemy armor, but they fire them faster. But you won't notice that much. I'm not sure if that 4 rounds a minute is really going to help you. I'd say go with the Scorpion as opposed to the Cascabel. Next up, AA territory. The Lanza Ziggler. Nothing really special about these guys. Ziggler, 2800 meter range, 2450 against planes, 3-man squad, easy to kill. Nothing needs to be said about these boys. The Strela is their other alternative. The Strela 3, far inferior stats to the Ziggler. You're looking at less range against helicopters, less range against planes, accuracy drops, HE drops half a point. No. The Lanza Strela might be effective in groups or spread out across your forces, just deterring helicopters from getting close, but I prefer to have something that can actually hit and not a helicopter that flies through 5 or 10 units of Strela and survives. Another HEGM option that we have, and I'm going to compare these side by side to the Agroat, is the Lanza Concours. Same Concours missile that you can see on pretty much every Red 4 unit. Range is pretty bad. Well, that's not entirely fair. It's the standard HGM range, 26-25. Again, keep in mind that most Blue 4 units have APS on them, so the Concours missile might look good, but it's not going to be that effective. As for damage, it does 20 direct versus 15 to top armor. So with IFVs, this could still work. With most tanks, frontal armor is going to be at 20 or higher, meaning that you'll do very little damage to them. And with tanks which have 20 armor or higher being at a strength of about 20 to 30, you're going to have to fire 20 Concours at the frontal armor of a tank in order to knock it out. Good luck. Not recommended. What else do we have? We have the Marina. Marina are a regular trained group, 15-man strength. They're pretty irregular in that sense. They have the Imbel 1A2. This is a weapon that we have seen before. Which one carries that? Yes, the Forza Rapida. These guys have, considering that they are regular trained versus shock trained, they have worse stats. Their accuracy drops. Rate of fire, for some reason, also drops. I think this is a bit weird, because they're a 15-man squad. You'd say that 15 guys, even if they can't aim as well as the Forza Rapida, can still put more lead down target. But that doesn't really seem to be the case. And it seems like the unit or the weapon icon doesn't quite stack up here. As for the other weapon, FN Mag versus the FN Mag, so exactly the same, but thanks to these guys being regular trained, they do not fire it as accurately when sitting still, and they don't have a stabilizer for it at all. This thing at least can be used in the same building as enemy infantry is. This thing cannot. It's more of a standoff weapon. And then the Mara versus the Instalatza C90 M3. 21 AP, 55% accuracy. It is slightly more effective against enemy armor than this one, and they carry a lot more charges. So you're going to have to be firing a lot of them if you want to again go through frontal armor of about 20. Let's see, does that cover it? No, they have even more. Again, so far no new transports, or I would have covered them. The P. Pretos, regular trained infantry. Nothing too special about these guys. Again, the Imbel 1A2. Again, accuracy is pretty low. These guys come with the very outdated M72A4. 14 AP? No thanks. No thanks. And then finally they have the Rayos. These are heavy tag units, so they take less damage from HE. Interestingly, they're the only heavy tag unit that has, or the only infantry unit with a heavy tag. So most of the infantry is going to have to be strength in numbers versus strength through that heavy tag. And, well, you're just going to have to try and find a way around it. I know that... Which one was it? Canada. Canada has a lot of heavy tag units. And this one, for some reason, doesn't. Anyway, Rayos, Galil ACE-32 that we've seen before, the FN Mag, and the Apelas. Pretty well-rounded units, mostly capable of holding the front line all by themselves. How you get them to the front line is up to you. They have one new transport option, that's the Cougar. No rocket pods or autocannons, unfortunately. You're just looking at an NSV machine gun. And that is it. Moving on to supports. Quite a few options here. For rocket artillery, you have three variants. You have the Smerch, which we all know and love, or hate, depending on what end you are of the weapon. It's a top attacking AP weapon. Then we have the Tokcha, fires the tactical SRBM. This thing does only HE damage. And finally we have the Asteroids 2. This thing is a more large area HE bombardment weapon. Keep in mind all three now have the lock tag, or LOC tag, locatable. Will be targeted by ELINT sensors and as such by seeker weapons. So your seed aircraft will be targeting the Smerch, the Tokcha and the Asteros. Some AA then. ITO 86, a couple of Iglas mounted on a flatbed truck. It's a very fast flatbed truck, but it comes with absolutely no armor. Still, I would argue that you could make much more use of the ITO 86 than you could of, for example, the Lanza Ziggler. These guys carry 6 missiles, these guys carry 10. And especially considering that even with your cheapest transport option, you're almost paying as much. You're paying 15 plus 4 is 19 points. You get a shitty transport. I'd say only if you're using these guys in towns, use the Lanza Ziggler. Otherwise, the ITO 86 would be a superior pick. The longer range alternative is the Crotal 2. Crotal is nothing new. Long range weapon system, especially good against shooting helicopters before they are able to shoot back at you. Unfortunately, it's no longer always true, because some of the helicopters have HGMs that outrange you. The IT-PSV Su-57-2, again, long range against helicopters and planes. It might not look like much, but this thing can be quite annoying if you spread it out over your front line. And then the IT-PSV Marksman. Interestingly, neither of these have the def tag, so they cannot shoot down HEGMs. In case this is the first Ashen Shadows video that you're looking at, shooting down HEGMs is something that some SPOGs have the capability of doing. I thought this one would have it, but for some reason it can't. Anyway, pretty good range against planes and helicopters. Accuracy is really good, and being set up on a chassis of a tank means you have quite a bit of armor. 7 front, 3 side. That is, depending on what sort of seed missile is being fired at you, just about enough to survive. But it's going to be close. Shooting down planes at larger range is left to the SA-3 Goa. 7.8 kilometer range, 70% accuracy and 9 HE. This thing hits you and there's a fairly good chance that your plane's going to go down in one go. You could try just to have a couple of these in the front line. This thing fires most likely first. The missile flies up to your jet gets hit, it might not go down, and then the Su-57-2 can finish it off. In case this is not long range enough for you, we also have the Buka. 9.1 kilometer range, accuracy is even further boosted to 85%, and HE at 9 again does a tremendous amount of damage. Surgai mod is something completely different. Just a ZU-23-2 mounted on a flat bat. Again, it's the same flat bat as the one we have seen on the Ito. So you're looking at exactly the same stats for moving the weapon around. I personally wouldn't pay 30 points for this if I could pay 25 points for the Igla transport. So the Surgai, yes, it can do anti-ground range, but with the multitude of IFVs and APCs running around, I don't think that this is going to be too useful on the front line. And then a couple of artillery systems, the Telak 84 and the Telak 91. The Telak 84, 35,000 meter range versus 31,000 meter range. You're looking at 152 versus 155. This thing, however, can also, in a pinch, be used in a direct assault role. But if something manages to sneak up to your Telak 84, and it is not even infantry because it does not have HE in this role, then something has gone horribly wrong. Interestingly, it does have 14 frontal armor on an armored, on a howitzer. Not really what you'd expect. Rate of fire slightly better on the 91, and the 91 has the same amount of HE. So if you want to deliver a bit more ordnance with a bit more accuracy, I'd say go for the 91. I don't really see why you would want exactly to have the Telak 84. Tanks. They have a lot of cheap options, and this concerns me. They do not have anything that has a ton of armor. AMX-30 Escorpion. It might look like a tank, but it's an HGM vehicle. That's quite unexpected. It fires the Cornet HGM. 55% accuracy, 27 AP. This thing will definitely make a large dent in enemy armor, regardless of what it fires at. The vehicle itself is pretty much defenseless. 5 frontal armor means that even IFV autocannons can go through the armor of this thing. Side armor, top armor, back armor, they're all negligible. Off-road speed, unfortunately, at 60 is not that good. And this missile is not fire and forget, so you fire it, you're going to have to keep looking at your target until it hits. Argentino Mediano. I'm not exactly sure if this is an upgraded Leopard. I don't believe so, because it does not carry the standard weapon that you see on the Leopard ones. Overall stats, it is pretty good in firing, not so much at firing on the move, unfortunately. AP at 16 is not that high, but keep in mind you're only paying 18 points for these. They're very, very cheap. They're cheaper than some IFVs. And with 9 frontal armor and 4 side, you have enough to survive most IFVs. So you could argue that blending, let's say, 2 or 3 of these between your front line So let's say your first unit that goes up to the enemy or goes up to a town and tries to capture it early game. This thing could be very effective at just neutralizing enemy transports. Next, the EET-1 Osorio. It is definitely better at firing in the sense that it has worse. No, it has the same amount of accuracy, 60-60, but stabilizer is far worse. You're pretty much sacrificing a bit of stabilization for a little bit of AP and more armor. 13 frontal armor versus 9 frontal armor, but your rate of fire drops. You go from 10 rounds a minute to 8 rounds a minute. I'd say go with the Argentino Mediano instead of the Osorio. Then the Leopard 1V, very good stabilized tank. This thing does come with the pretty much famous L7A3. Also has a smoke discharger, and the fact that you're seeing it here doesn't mean that other tanks don't have it, because Wargame can only show you 3 weapons per card. 10 frontal armor, 4 on the side, a little bit on the back, and it is particularly vulnerable from the top. So, just to bring that into perspective, let's say you're firing at a Leopard 1V with an Agruat, so with a Spike MR. This thing does 15 AP. It gets a little bit of resistance from the top armor, but it almost knocks out that tank in one go. That's how effective those Spike MRs can be. The other tank that they have, they went straight from the Leopard 1V to the 2A4. 2A4 has a good bit of frontal armor, 19, 9 on the side. AP is also at 19. Rate of fire is pretty good, but not as good as the L7A3. HE unfortunately still 3. And I gotta say, paying 71 points for a Leopard 2A4, that's not bad. Unfortunately, it does not have an APS, but it does have 2 smoke dischargers, so you have 2 smoke charges instead of just 1. Next up, the Sherman M60. Not really sure when exactly you would want to use this weapon. It's a stationary weapon, meaning it's going to be pretty bad at advancing with your group, but it has a very high rate of fire, 29 rounds a minute. It does kinetic damage, so it will not do damage to anything more heavily armored than 11 unless you're getting really close to it. It does a little bit of HE damage, but not too much. It's a small caliber weapon. Armor is very low. Speed off-road is bad, 40 kph. Autonomy is bad at 270. But I think that against transports, this is not one of those units that could be very useful. The problem is, I'd say the Mediano is more effective. Because this thing at 3 frontal armor is going to get laughed at by enemy IFVs with an autocannon. This thing is going to be respected with 9 frontal armor. Well, unless the enemy fires an HGM at it, of course. Then we have the T-55 M8A2 Typhon. Very powerful HGM on this thing. Laser guided missile, doing 2800 meter range, 60% accuracy. Just do not fire it when you're moving. That is not going to work out with this thing. It does hit hard, 23 AP, and that means that it hits harder than the main gun at 21. Frontal armor at 17 and side armor at 9 means that it's slightly worse armor than the Leopard that we just saw. Leopard had 19, this thing has 17. You're sacrificing armor for more firepower, but you don't have as much staying power as the Leopard 2A4. And then the best tank that they can field, the T-72 BV1. 21 frontal armor, 23 AP, and no HGM, but you do get a machine gun and a smoke discharger. I don't think it has an APS, and that's something that concerns me, because so far, none of these tanks have an APS. The only exception being the Type 90-2. This thing looks like one of the Chinese tanks, and I think it might very well be. It's a PLA 125. Pretty good armor, or at least armor piercing. Armor at 14, not that good. Comes with the Invar HGM, good range, good AP, even pretty well when you're firing it on the move. It's just not that survivable at 14 frontal armor. This is not a unit that you really want to deploy against enemy heavy armor, because 22 AP is just not enough. In the worst possible case, if you're going up against the British, and the British decide to field their 25 frontal armor Challenger 2 Mark II, not even the Invar is going to be very effective against it. Yes, it will do some damage, but this thing has 30 points of strength. You're going to have to fire a lot of these Invars at it. And even if you do fire them, there's a very good chance that the Raytheon Quick Kill will shoot it down. And this concerns me, actually. No APS on the tanks, they're all pretty cheap. You're going to have to go strength in numbers, which definitely goes against my playstyle. Next, we have the Buzos Tácticos. HK-53 for assault rifle, and interestingly a Barrett M95. Very heavy sniper rifle. This thing does 2 AP at 2100 meter range. This can only get better the shorter range you get. Of course, the question is, do you really want to fire that weapon? I would argue no, because it's an exceptional stealth team. You might get away with firing it at maximum range, but the closer you get, the better your chances of detection. Or the worse, depending on how you look at it. And do you really want to throw away a 20-point unit just to fire that Barrett? You could argue yes. Hell yes, it's a Barrett M95, I don't fire that. I'd be careful with these. As for transport options, you have the Gaucho, the M17 or M171, and the Cougar. I'd say it doesn't really matter too much. The Cougar is slightly faster at 300. And yeah, take the Cougar. The Cougar has, overall, I'd say better stats than the M17 or M171. Yes, you're looking at slightly less strength, but you're smaller, meaning that even if you get detected despite your medium stealth, you are less likely to get hit, and that speed might allow you to just maneuver outside of range. Next are the Cazadores. 1.1 HE on the SAF 200 that we've seen before, the Mara AT weapon, and the Dragunov SVD. Very good infantry, or at least very good stealth, shock trained, very good optics. Could be useful at sniping out enemy infantry at range, and especially with the SAF, they can also hold their own at short range. But at short range, so let's say in the same building, you will not be able to use the Dragunov. So try to engage enemy infantry before they actually get to your town. Hit them with the Dragunov, and then try to finish them off with the SMG. Next is a reconnaissance vehicle, the Cascavel Rico. Cockerel Mark III. It's an okay weapon, 11 AP, 3 HE, rate of fire 7 rounds a minute is a bit lacking. They come with the Mectron MSS 1.2 HGM, good range, 2905. AP is really high, accuracy is okay, and unfortunately it is not fire and forget, which for a vehicle that has almost no armor I would really love. So you can just fire off this thing and run. So far there are very few units in the game that I have seen that can do this. The French come to mind, but the Cascavel Rico unfortunately cannot do it. Two fast, unarmored and unarmed off-roaders. The Gaz 69A and the Escutero. This thing is unfortunately slower than a Gaz. That is quite unusual. But it does have very good stealth, and that's something that this thing cannot say. So this is something that you can rush to the front line and just park somewhere in a tree line. This thing, yeah, sure, you can park it in a tree line, but the question is it going to get detected, yes or no? This thing is more likely not going to be getting detected. More infantry, Grumek. An interesting, I'd say, commando unit. I'm not sure if the game agrees. Steyr AUG A3, 1.1 HE, very good against enemy infantry. But unfortunately, they don't have an SMG, a law that can help them out there. They do have an Appalachian with 8 rounds and an Igla with 5 rounds. Quite good behind enemy lines at just harassing the enemy as well as scouting. They will probably win a fight against enemy infantry, provided you're not looking at some sort of elite infantry. Because you have a heavy tag, you have the Steyr AUG A3 with that 1.1, AUG. Very good rate of fire, very good accuracy. I'd say these guys will probably win, and if they get hunted down by a helicopter or a vehicle up close, they can kill either. Then we have the M113 Razit, exceptional optics, nothing special here. And the AMX-13 Rico, again, a repurposed AMX-13 tank. Unfortunately, no stabilizer, so you can maneuver or you can fire, but not both. The gun is okay, unfortunately no heat rounds, which would have been fairly useful for a tank like this. And then a couple of Recon Helicopters, the MD-530, I don't know if this thing can land on water, but let's assume not. And the Bell 206A5, exceptional optics, poor stealth, unfortunately. It's not really what you'd expect, because most transport helicopters do come with medium stealth, but this thing apparently comes with poor stealth. That might be something that Spectre overlooked, or it might be design, I'm not sure. And then finally we have the PT-76B E-Lint, so more likely to spot enemy locatable units, and the Leopard Vigyar. This thing, 10 frontal armor, a little bit of side, back and top. Very good optics, medium stealth on a tank is fantastic to have. 15 AP, pick your shots carefully, because it will go through the side of virtually any tank, but frontal armor, no. It's just not going to go through frontal armor. Couple of vehicles, not too many. They have the AML Lynx. The AML 90 Lynx has 11 AP and 3 HE. Again, no heat rounds, which would again be very handy on a vehicle like that. In its current form, I don't see this thing being very useful, because, well, pretty much anything will one-shot it. Even if you're looking at an autocannon, you could argue, yeah, well, an autocannon won't one-shot it. True, an autocannon will not one-shot it, but an autocannon has the rate of fire to still very quickly be rid of this thing. And if this thing is moving when the autocannon is sitting still, I don't really favor the chances of this thing. The Marua, just a Jeep with the Mectron MSS 1.2 that I've seen previous. Pretty good. Again, no fire and forget AGGMs. This is something that I really don't like. I like my fire and forget AGGMs, and some of these nations have them. Yes, they're expensive, but they are so damn useful. What other transports or what other vehicles do they have? Yeah, they have the Talak 66, just 160mm mortar, 6 HE, pretty damn good. Rate of fire is not as high. This thing is more of an actual damager. If you're looking for something that deploys smoke at a high rate of fire, the Talak RH71 is a better choice. HE is far lower, 3 versus 6, but you're firing a lot more rounds, and this is going to allow you to put up a smoke screen faster. If you want something downright the middle, you got the Tuncha, 120mm, carries 60 rounds, 5 HE, so significantly closer to the 66 that I just showed you. And it has a decent rate of fire, 9 versus 7 versus 18. And then finally some tow vehicles, or some AGGM vehicles really. The Tow 2, direct attack, no top attack weapon. Very fast vehicle. Survivability is negligible. And especially considering that the enemy has APS, I still wonder about the effectiveness of these units. You have to overwhelm them, so you have to group them up. The Cascavel, again, very poorly armored vehicle. It comes with the Cockerel and the Maypats. Pretty good HGM, better range than the Tow 2. AP favors the Tow 2. It only carries 6 rounds, but it's more of a multi-role vehicle. It can also do some direct engagements. But again, a tank destroyer, as such, is there to do exactly what it says, destroy tanks. A Cockerel Mark III is not likely to destroy a tank. And then finally the Cascavel Mx8. Again, Mechatron or Mectron, as well as the Cockerel. For some reason they really like this weapon. Helos, not a whole lot. Cougar is the transport. They got the Helibras Fennec, a couple of Tow 2 missiles. The Pantera, this thing carries autocannons with an incredible rate of fire, almost 2,500 rounds a minute. Considering you only carry 800, means you're going to have to very closely pick your targets if you want to use these things for anything effective. because in about 20 seconds they're out of ammo. That's it. They have the TY-90B, which is an air-to-air missile. Pretty good against helicopters, not that good towards planes, but at least it's fire and forget. Medium stealth on a helo, pretty fast, pretty good autonomy. It's an okay helicopter to screen for your forces. AH-2 Sabre, again, please don't look at the unit model. Yak B, Attacker V, and the Kokon. It's interesting to see a mix of two different HEGMs mounted on the same vehicle. I have never seen a combination like this. So this is definitely a first for me. I would say use the Kokon as your main weapon, because the enemy is most likely to have an APS and is most likely to just be able to shoot down those missiles. Once the Kokon Ms have exhausted the enemy APS, that's when you start firing the Attacker V. This thing will actually deliver the blow to the enemy armor. The Mi-28, again, Attacker V, a couple of rocket pods, and the two A-42. It has a little bit of armor, and this really helps in keeping it alive. It even survives HE impacts from smaller caliber AA weapons. Don't fire anything too large at it or it will still go down. But with rocket pods, Attacker, and the two A-42, it's a very nice multi-role. And then finally we have that transport. Lastly, planes. Starting off with the AMX-1 or A1A. This thing is a multi-role, mostly geared towards SEAD. It has a couple of short-range self-defense air-to-air weapons, but mostly you're getting this for the MAR-1. 26 AP means it will shut down virtually any AA platform in one shot. Range is pretty good, but keep in mind that some of the longest range platforms, at say 9.1 kilometers, they will still fire before you do. And if that missile hits this plane, yes, it has 45% ECM to defend it, but if it hits, I'm not really optimistic about the chances of this thing staying alive. AT-26 Xavante. 2 HE bombs, and that's about it. It's just a standard bomber. It's 35 points, meaning it's cheaper than some of your tanks. And at 15 ECM and 900 km speed, this could very well be a one-way trip. F-16 Block 15 OCU cluster bomber. 20% ECM instead of 15 and a little bit more speed. Also a couple of AIM-9L in order to defend itself. Again, not really something that has a really high chance of survival. Yes, it will do damage to enemy armor, regardless. But I'm not sure how likely you are to survive with something like that. Peace Puma, in case you're dealing with enemy armor, is a better/different option. You could argue it's better because it has more range, 4305 versus 3500, but keep in mind these things cannot be dodged, these can. And dodging maybe not so much, but they can be shot down by APS. ECM jumped from 20 to 30%, so that's definitely an improvement. But again, I would try to at least have it escorted by one of those AMXs to just either threaten or completely kill enemy AA platforms. Next, we have the F5EM. The F5EM just being a rocket pod plane. It's very fast. It only has 10% ECM, which is really, really low. And maybe the speed can keep it alive, but I'm not optimistic about this plane. The Kiefer, or KIFRCE, drops a couple of 500 kilogram napalm bombs. Of course, they don't do too much for HE, but they do a pretty large amount of napalm damage. 20% ECM. This seems to be a trend. Not a lot of ECM going on across the whole board so far. MiG-29, 913. Air Superiority Fighter. Let's compare that to the F-16C MLU. Let's not, actually, because this... Sorry, this is not a fighter. What is a fighter? They don't have another fighter. Cool. Okay, so the MiG-29, a couple of long-range fire and forget air-to-air. 8.2 kilometer range is okay. It's not stellar, because some of the other planes have 10 kilometers. and up. F-16C MLU drops 2 laser-guided bombs at a range of almost 5 clicks, doing 22 HE. That's really going to leave a mark, although I have fired 22 HE bombs at infantry, and infantry with a heavy tag. Yeah, they're going to be a little bit concerned about it, but it just doesn't really do too much. Now, I said this thing is not a fighter, and I'm sticking to that because it is definitely a multi-role, but it does have 6 long-range AIM-120A MRAMs. These can be used as a sort of semi-fighter, but they just don't dogfight very well. The Su-25SM, a couple of rocket pods, and 6 fire and forget anti-tank weapons. It's pretty slow, 750, meaning that you give the enemy ample time to get to this plane with a fighter of their own. It does have a pretty good amount of armor on it. 2 front, 1 side, 2 back, 1 top. Not sure when one exactly top armor on a plane is going to be useful, because I believe that the planes are pretty much a 2D situation for fighting, but here we are. The rocket pods, I don't think they're going to be too useful, because normally you just get a chance to fire off a couple of these and then evac. For these, you're going to have to get significantly closer at 2450 meter range versus 4.2 clicks. Next, the Su-30Mk. This is a weird plane. Normally, you find these jammer pods on a seed aircraft, but they decided to mount them on a bomber. So this is a bomber that can shut down enemy AA for long enough so that it gets in range and drops its 1500 kilogram cargo, 3 of those no less. Does a very high amount of HE, 28, and it will shut down enemy radar, it will shut down enemy artillery, but it will not kill them. That's unusual. Does not have a seeker missile. No seed missile on these things. I'm not sure what to think of this. I think it's an interesting concept, but how likely is it to be used in practice? Because yes, a combination of these two would be very useful if you're going to fly them in together. But here's the thing. This thing flies at 1,000 kilometers. This thing flies at 600. You're going to have to micromanage the hell out of these things instead of just asking 2 jets to make a flyby, one to go on a bombing run and the other one to go on a seed run. It's going to be tough getting these things combined. And finally, the Su-30MKV. A couple of long-range anti-tank weapons, fire and forgets, thankfully. A couple of long-range air-to-air missiles as well. 40% ECM, pretty fast, but not as fast as some of the other jets. Does not dogfight. No short-range air-to-air. Overall, for UNASUR, I'm concerned. It's definitely not my playstyle, but they seem to rely on strength in numbers. Especially if you're looking at their tanks. The best that they can field is 21 frontal armor and 23 AP. It's just not enough. Your ATGMs are all guided. Well, yeah, with the exception... No, not with even with the exception of the Spike MR. They are all guided. The only unguided ATGMs, the fire and forgets, are the ones that are mounted on the planes. Where are you? Here. K-29. Everything else, you're going to have to guide it in. Their tech is just not as high tech as, let's say, US, British, German, Japanese, South Korea. Some of these guys have some really advanced weaponry. Overall, I would prefer not to play these. Sure, they have some really interesting infantry, but they're just not for me. But then again, that's just my opinion. Let me know what your opinion is down below in the comments. And if you still have a country that I haven't reviewed yet, be sure to vote down through the link in the description. Just upvote the country of your choice. We only have a few left. We're getting very close to finishing off the Armory reviews. And let me know what you want me to review next by voting through that link in the description. Anyway, that's it for now. Let me know what your thoughts are on UNASUR down below in the comments, and I'll see you soon for the next video.